Hello and welcome to Begging the Question, where we got answers for all of your burning questions. I'm Dan Vaughn, the host of the show, joined by two spectacular co-hosts. Let's get them in here. Boom! Dan Creel Esquire.
Hello, Dan. Hello, YouTube. Hello, soccer people. We're here to answer your question, and we can hear each other, and we're going to have a good time. This is fun. I always look forward to this. This is awesome.
Yes. Speaking of hearing people, let's see if he can hear us. John Howard Fusco, welcome to the show.
Evening, Dan. Chewing gum and string.
There we go. Tinfoil.
Rub your hat.
Yep, right, exactly.
Rub your head and your stomach. Yeah. Well, welcome to the show. Guys, hope you've had a wonderful day. John Howard Fusco, let's start it off right. Taylor ham or pork roll? What's the answer?
There is only one answer, and the answer is pork roll. And this is the explanation by a fellow by the name of Pete Genovese, who writes for NJ.com, who knows more about, he's probably forgotten more about New Jersey food than anyone that actually knows about Jersey food. And he puts it this way, that all Taylor ham is pork roll, but not all pork roll is Taylor ham. Pork roll is what it is. Taylor ham is just a brand name. So that's the answer.
Okay.
But our North Jersey people get very sensitive, so we humor them. Like, okay, you want to call it Taylor ham? It's okay. That's all right.
Dan Creel, yes. Crunchy peanut butter or creamy peanut butter?
Oh, I mean, both are fine, but crunchy.
Oh yeah, I agree about
without
that.
Without a doubt.
You ever had cookie butter?
Cookie butter.
It's like peanut butter, but they sell it at Trader Joe's. That's where I got introduced to it. It's delicious. But
apple butter. I've had apple butter.
Sure.
Butter,
Yeah.
yes.
But crunchy peanut butter, definitely the way to go. John, you had agreement on that, by the way. You seem like you were.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My wife likes creamy, and she's raising my daughter that way. And
you got to put a stop
to that. Yep.
Need to have a conversation about that.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of conversations, let's have a conversation with the beginning of this show with a question from our friend, Damon.
Oh, hey there. I'm Damon Gochneaur, co-founder of the Denton Diablos, your 2021 NPSL National Champions. Caught me while I was busy polishing all of our hardware, as we do every year at this time. Congratulations to the 2023 NPSL National Championships. Close friend of mine, Sonny D'Alessandro, and the Tulsa Athletics. Well deserved. And since you're begging for a question, gentlemen and ladies, do we see the U.S. men's national team win the next World Cup before we see the U.S. women's national team win their next World Cup?
All right, Damon asks, who are we going to see win a World Cup first again? U.S. men's, U.S. women's. Before we get too deep into this, I'd like to mention that Damon Gochneaur, the supplier of our question tonight, he and I used to do a U.S. men's national team focused podcast, and so I do know that he is a avid supporter of the U.S. national team, both men's and women's. But I'll say this from my perspective, and we could get into it with you guys, but it feels to me that rumors of the U.S. women's national team's death may be slightly exaggerated. That, yes, 100%, we were all disappointed by the result in this year's World Cup. However, they did go out to a team that made it to the quarterfinals, and they went out on penalties, meaning that they were not far from winning. Did they play beautiful soccer? No. But there's plenty of reasons to believe that this women's team has a lot of life left in them. Guys, I know that y'all don't focus as much on the national team as I do, but I do know that you watch some of the World Cup. Dan, why don't you kick us off?
Quick answer. Well, first, two quick things. Damon Gochneaur's beard, just a thing of beauty. Like, we all three are sporting just kind of regular, everyday kind of working man's beards. Damon Gochneaur's is just, another level. Plus, very soft-spoken, Dan Vaughn. He was very soft-spoken in that. He was just like keeping it very
Yeah, he's a wild child usually.
Keeping his Texas down on that one. So quick answer. No, the women are going to win a World Cup before the men win a World Cup. I would put money. I'm not a betting man, but I would put money on it. The structure, the talent level of the U.S. women's team, they just have everything going for them compared to the men's situation. The world has basically caught up to the U.S. women's on the national level, but it's kind of like the world caught up to the Brazil men's team. The world caught up to the German men's team, right? You could say that. Do they win it every year? Both of those teams, no, but every year, every 4 years, but World Cup in, World Cup out, Brazil, Germany, top teams like that are always up there with the favorites. And I think we're probably, my opinion is we are moving into an era where that's what we should think about the U.S. women's team, that they're going to be maybe the favorite or one of the top 2-3 favorites every single year. And that fans of the team should expect them to win a championship and be disappointed when they don't. But it's not like the men's team where we're all biting our fingernails. Are they going to qualify? Are they going to make the group out of the group stage? Ooh, they're going to make it into the top 8 or 16 and that. The women's team is on another level. I agree with you, Dan, that the kind of the talk about, oh my God, the world is, the sky is falling for the women's team, they're done, is way overblown. There's a lot of reasons why the World Cup this year went that way. They could be like just off the charts by next World Cup, looking at the talent that's coming for the women's team. So yes, it's a. I know you just didn't want me to say no. I went into a little bit, but yes. So I focus more on the women's side because kind of focusing on the men's side tends to be a little bit negative. But yeah, yes, the women's team, the women's game in the U.S. is just so far ahead of where the U.S. men's.
Can I offer just a quick caveat before we get to you, John? I would argue that the World Cup is more interesting with better teams playing. Like, I understand, of course, that we have grown to expect the U.S. women to dominate, but closer games are more fun to watch. I thought their match against the Netherlands was incredibly exciting. It ended in a 1-1 draw. Fun match to watch. And when we scored the equalizer, I jumped out of my seat and yelled because I was so excited about it. It was spectacular. It was a spectacular match to watch. Even the match against Sweden when we went out was a fun match to watch. It was, yes, I was disappointed with the result. I wanted better, but it had everything you could want in a good soccer match. I think that's a great thing. I want Spain to be successful without some of the leadership there. But I want Spain to be successful. I want England to be successful. I want to see the rise of women's soccer overall because it makes for a more interesting tournament. Could it mean less U.S. women's national team World Cup wins? Maybe, but I think overall the women are actually, the U.S. women are responsible for the growth of women's soccer. And I would argue their battle and then the eventual joining of the U.S. men's national team to come together to have equal dispensation of the funds from the World Cup is a great model that could influence the rest of the world. And so all of those things are great. And if that means the world catches up, well, that's good. We want to play the best people in the world. And that means that you have to have other teams come up to your level because when you're at our level, they're just not. John.
Yeah. I mean, just talk about the World Cup that just ended. I mean, there was a lot of concern about, the women's game. Oh, we can't have 32 teams. There's not 32 good teams. And I thought it was a very enjoyable World Cup, and there were very, very few games where I thought it was just lopsided results. I thought it was very competitive. I mean, and before we go on about the women's team disappointing. I mean, think about Germany. Think about Brazil. They didn't even make it out of the group stage. And that's what happens in World Cups. Good teams sometimes don't make it out of the group stage. Sometimes good teams get knocked out early. It happens. That's a sign of a very competitive tournament. As you alluded to before, Brazil on the men's side doesn't win every World Cup. Germany doesn't win every World Cup. The country that invented the modern game, England, has won the World Cup once, and that was the year they hosted it in 1966. It's very difficult to win the World Cup. The fact that women have won it 4 times is pretty amazing. That being said, talent-wise, they're going to be competitive for a long time. This World Cup, you could argue that coaching was not up to the level what we needed to be. There were some key injuries in certain positions that hurt the team. But yeah, I mean, definitely, it's good to be disappointed. But this has happened sometimes. They're not guaranteed to win every time. For the men, the reality is, if you leave out 1930, which is so far ago, and that was the first one, and you kind of have to take that one with a grain of salt. I mean, other than 2002, where we got to the quarters, I mean, just getting out of the group for the men is just, that in itself is the accomplishment. So when that's your mentality, to think about, winning the World Cup anytime soon, I just don't see it on the men's side yet. I really don't. Until we're producing like multiple world-class strikers that are playing in top clubs, that we have talent at that level. Now, certainly talent-wise, it's a very good, it's very, very good team for US side, but still missing some key elements that you really need if you want to be a world power. And I just don't think as a collective we're there yet. So, but I'm really interested to see what happens in 2026 when it's at home. Will that give us a little extra boost? Because if you get to the quarterfinals, if you can get there, then I think the narrative changes for the men's side and people have a better opinion of them. But if you just scrape out of the group stage, lose in the initial, knockout stages, and it's kind of like the same old for the men's team.
I had this thought as we record this that Christian Pulisic has just recently moved over to AC Milan, and I was thrilled that he scored 2 goals in his first 2 matches, back-to-back matches. And then I realized that the corpse of Olivier Giroud has scored 3 goals in those same matches. Now, I love Olivier Giroud. He's a very handsome man. But he's on his pretty much last leg of his career. And it says something about the success that we see in a player. And then when you start actually putting up against what other players are doing from other countries, you realize that our talent level, particularly on the men's side, is not up to par with even players that are sort of middling for their own countries. I think the same thing about oftentimes Josh Sargent gets brought up playing in champion. Well, I guess he's not in championship now, right? Because Norwich get promoted.
They're
still in championship. They didn't get promoted. They're still championship.
Right.
Yep. And he recently injured, by the way. But he had scored a couple of goals, or I think he scored like 14 goals last year. And this year he had started off and scored a couple of goals. But there are other players that are like scoring handfuls of goals in the same time frame. And you begin to think about it, and you're like, oh, wow, even we have made leaps and bounds as far as our penetration into the best leagues in the world. And I think that we can herald that success and say maybe someday, right? But we are not there yet. The women, on the other hand, have consistently been there. 4 World Cups for a competition that effectively started in the early 90s for the women is insane. We're talking about 30 years, a little bit over 30 years, and they have 4 World Cups. That's just, I oftentimes joke with my daughter. She has a couple of women's national team shirts, and they've got the stars on them. And I'll put my men's team shirts on. She's like, "Dad, where are the stars on yours?" And I'm like, yeah, good question, very good question. I do think that it is fair to say that the hiring of Latko probably was a mistake. and that how the Federation deals with his exit, and also the exit of Kate Margraf, who was the GM for the women's side, that I think that how they handle this will, I think, influence how quickly we climb back up. How quickly we get back into competition for a World Cup. I do think that's important. I've heard some of the names that are being discussed, and it feels like that there is some like smart discussion happening around that. We'll see. I know that the Federation also chose Vlatko, so let's be real. There are some changes in leadership there. We'll see what happens. But I think that regardless of the hand that you're dealt, if you don't know how to play the hand effectively, it kind of doesn't matter what cards are in your hand. And I think that Vlatko's approach to, I think, certainly roster management, and I think you could double down and say like tactics going into the matches was just not up to par with the teams that we were playing against. And I think it's fair to say that we may be one of the most talented teams in the world, but tactically and I think from a leadership perspective, I think we're lagging, and that does need to be corrected. No one gets the crown handed to them for free. You've got to earn it in this sport, and I definitely think that that's something that will play a role in how quickly we bounce back. I have to admit that while Jill Ellis did have her warts as a leader, she got things done and we won World Cups under her. And I think particularly under the sort of listless, sort of embarrassing leadership of Vlatko, where he just kind of seemed overmatched always, that was a tough thing to swallow as a fan of this team. Creel, any final thoughts on this?
I just want to quickly connect to what you're saying. Like the discussion you were having, kind of the things you're bringing up, were like definitely something that the Federation needs to think about, because perhaps if we have another situation with Vlatko, again, the women won't win the World Cup, right? But if things go right, they're probably the favorite to win the World Cup. Now shift over to the men's team. If they do things right, like if they have hired a coach, but let's just say that was the right hire. Maybe. The basic with the men, it's kind of like, oh great, they've made the right hire and kind of figured things out. So now they're going to have a chance, like they're going to look good in a group stage, and they'll have a chance to maybe kind of win one knockout round, and maybe they can go on a roll. Maybe, oh gosh, wouldn't that be great? It'd be lovely. So I think just that, how we think about, oh boy, if the Federation does the right thing or if they screw up, compare that to the outcomes with the men's team compared to the women's team. I think that tells you kind of where each program is. And just real quickly to finish, both the men's team and the women's team are both kind of have to deal with the U.S. structure and the pyramid and the development cycle, but we see where the women's team is compared to the men's team. I think the situation is just so much better for the women's team that that even if the men's team does everything right, they could end up getting knocked out in the first round or the second round. Right. If the women do everything right, they're going to win the World Cup. Pretty right. So, yeah, I think the Federation. I think the world is catching up, and the Federation needs to do a better job dealing with that. But the position where each program is right now, the women are just so much in a better place, given all that.
Yeah, I really can't add too much more to what Creel was saying about that. In World Cup, unlike other tournaments that we watch, you're not going to get a Cinderella story. That doesn't happen in the World Cup. It's the very talented teams are the ones who usually end up the top and winning it. It's usually talent plus the coaching, but you got to have the talent. And for the men's side right now, yeah, I mean, we had a great run in 2002, but eventually just a better talented team beat us. And that's how it works in the World Cup. Eventually the talent wins out. And the women, talent-wise, relatively speaking, are just in a much better position than the men are right now. the men are getting better. More and more players are seeking their fortune out in leagues in Europe, and you're seeing more men playing and succeeding in European leagues. But it's still not. You're still not where Spain is. You're not where Germany is. You're not where Brazil is. You're not where Argentina is. Those countries that have because soccer in those countries is top dog, and that's another thing. It's just much more important in those countries than it is here.
All right. Well, Damon Gochneaur, I hope that you're happy with our questions. We look forward to our women to regain the crown and hold on to another World Cup trophy. Very deserving. And can we please get Mal Swanson healthy and back? Because I do kind of wonder, given the streak that she was on in qualifying, if that would have changed things. Dan Creel, John Howard Fusco, amazing work as always. Excellent job at answering the questions that we begged for. Have a good one, and we'll be back with another question very soon. Thank you.